welcome to the 17th window of the TooFatLardies 2021 Advent Calendar. And today we're going to be joined by Richard talking about his favourite, yes, his favourite gaming mechanism. Which one has he chosen? Ladies and gentlemen, let's find out now.
When people talk about game design, you'll often see conversations on various forums where people will say that there's nothing new under the sun and all game design today is just simply a rehash of what's gone before. Well, I've been designing games for 20 years, and I would say that this is complete and utter rubbish. It's rather like saying that no new piece of art is valid or exciting because another artist previously has already used the colour red. In game design, what I think is key is how mechanisms are used and combined in order to create an overall effect. No single mechanism really stands on its own, but they're all in there together in an ensemble. Some mechanisms might be completely new. Now, for example, I think that the patrol phasing cock was a completely novel idea. But, you know, they can equally be rehashed or revised versions of what's gone before, maybe used in a slightly different way or maybe combined with another in a manner that gives a fresh overall approach. Reinventing the wheel isn't always the sensible thing to do, even if we have to think about it every time we approach a new game. Of all the game mechanisms that I've used or even designed, my personal favourite isn't in any of the TooFatLardies rule sets, but it was actually used in a game that I ran way back in 1998, predating Lard, and which was then published in Wargames Illustrated magazine as a set of very short, literally one-page rule set that we'd used at the Christmas club game for Roman chariot races. The premise was that this was the lower league of chariot racing, and struggling against the Chariot Premier League to get funding had become more violent and gladiatorial in order to attract the crowds. Rather than just racing, charioteers were intent on attacking their opponents in a rather sort of Mad Max version of the amphitheatre. Collisions galore, whip attacks, chariots crashing and somersaulting, the charioteers then attempting to avoid being run down in the most dramatic manner. Indeed, I was looking for a suitably dramatic mechanism by which unseated charioteers could try to reach safety, when I hit upon an unlikely solution, which I gave the even more unlikely name, the Bruce Forsyth Play Your Cards Right Stadium Leaving Method, which is obviously a mouthful because I can't even say it. Well, apologies to anyone here who's not in the UK or Commonwealth, but just a brief explanation. Sir Bruce Forsyth, as he became, was a huge British TV personality whose TV career spanned over 70 years, something that the Guinness Book of Records states makes him the longest male TV entertainer that the world has ever seen. Anyway, he specialised in hosting all sorts of game shows, usually pretty dire, but one of which was called Play Your Cards Right, and the premise was that the contestants would predict the sequence of cards by declaring whether the next card to be turned would be higher or lower than the one previously. I've got absolutely no idea why they did this, but I do recall that it was a show that got huge audience buy-in with shouts of higher and lower, very much the order of the day. Not just in the studio, but in anybody's house when they were watching it. But I do remember you got nothing for a pair in this game. So, anyway, with that in mind, we took this mechanism and used a simple deck of playing cards to determine how many squares the escaping charioteer would move. So I turned the top card, and let's say it was a 4. In order to move a square, the unhorsed charioteer, unhorsed, I don't know what you call it, the charioteer being chucked out of his chariot, had to predict what the next card was going to be. Well, 4, he's going to say higher. So let's say the next one out was a 9. Well, that was a fairly easy predict, higher than a 4. He gets to move one square. Now, in order to move another square, he's got to predict whether the next card is going to be higher or lower than a 9. That obviously becomes a little bit more complicated. And if the prediction was wrong, the charioteer halted where they were and were obvious targets for other drivers to mow them down in a cruel, senseless but suitably comedic fashion. It was, without doubt, and which possibly said something about the rest of the game, it was without doubt the best bit of the game. What I like about the mechanism is that it's simple, but it's also dramatic, and it's also captivating, and it's also inclusive. Whilst it's just one player who's actually involved in trying to make their escape, everyone playing is sucked into the event. Some cheering the correct turn of the card, some cheering the failures. In essence, I think it's the perfect standalone game mechanism. It's certainly the best one that I've ever used in terms of audience participation and fun. Funnily enough, I came across the game being played by our great mate Matt Slade at Salute in about 2006, maybe 2007. And Matt had built himself a suitably smashing amphitheatre with some great model chariots hurtling round it. And once again, the audience were absolutely loving the mechanism. The show, Play Your Cards Right, actually ended in 2003, but in 2006 it was still a livid scar on the memory of most of us. Matt, interestingly, told me that when he ran it a few years ago at Partisan, all the players over a certain age were joining in with cries of higher and lower, whereas the youngsters who were there were utterly nonplussed and looking on in horror at a seemingly spontaneous display of lunacy.